Alright, so today we're going to be talking about if Insurgency Sandstorm is still a good beginner tactical shooter. Now, over the past couple of years, there's been a lot of controversy regarding this game, a lot of change in design decisions, and we're just going to be going through talking about where the game has come from, because I think that history is important, where the game is going, and how it sits currently. So I guess to start with the origins of Insurgency Sandstorm, right? So from the very beginning, NWI has two titles under their belt. They have the original Insurgency, which was an absolute hit. I think almost all the tactical shooter players out there have the original Insurgency in their game library, just because it was constantly on sale. It was a bite-sized experience. It was a really innovative take on hardcore, low time to kill gameplay with fluid movement and gunplay mechanics in a faster paced world. So that was something that I think a lot of people enjoyed, was the fact that Insurgency took two opposites and melded them together, right? You didn't have to deal with the clunky kind of gameplay that Arma had, and with the arcadiness, it was all believable. Everything in the world of the original Insurgency, and more so in Day of Infamy, was believable, or quote-unquote realistic, right? You didn't see any wacky skins flying around, you didn't really have any weird game modes. Everything kind of felt believable and somewhat immersive as a result of that. Day of Infamy especially is a game that I want to talk about, because I know I see some comments out there, some narratives that like, oh, you know, NWI never intended Insurgency to be a hardcore or realistic, quote-unquote realistic game. It was always supposed to be an arcade style game. And while I understand kind of the sentiment behind that as far as the gameplay is concerned, how the gameplay is supposed to be fluid and fast, when we take a look at Day of Infamy especially, you can see that the origins of NWI, or the original gameplay design behind a lot of their decisions in both the original Insurgency and in Day of Infamy, was believability, keeping things thematic, keeping things immersive, right? Even the skins, because there are DLC skins in Day of Infamy as well, were believable, right? They were actual units that were used in history. It wasn't any of this weird Chinese New Year craziness or digital camo, or, you know, these digital blue and red camos and these masks and stuff that they're adding into Sandstorm. All of the skins even added in Day of Infamy were believable. They were units that would fit the time and the era, and it wasn't necessarily anything that would break your immersion. In addition to that, we can talk about game modes, right? A lot of the game modes from the original Insurgency, and once again, going back to Day of Infamy, were extremely thematic. It wasn't this new gun game, let's use pistols only and we get cash, and now we trade out the guns and we're killing zombies on all this stuff in Insurgency and in Day of Infamy. Day of Infamy had some of the best co-op versus AI game modes, I think, in any tactical shooter out there. And that was a huge thing, because there aren't that many tactical shooters that have co-op versus AI. It's mainly just Arma, Day of Infamy, and Insurgency Sandstorm. So having a really solid co-op versus AI experience in Day of Infamy was, I think, pretty special. And they did a really good job with the defense and fall back game mode, which is much more dynamic than the current outpost, or whatever you call the game mode in Sandstorm right now. Their raid game mode in Day of Infamy was absolutely amazing. Dynamic objectives that you had to work through as a team and continue through the map, and sometimes the objectives would change, compared to today's survival in Sandstorm, which is like, you start with a pistol, you get a random gun box in there, and you sprint through the map. You can see that like some things were just lost in translation from the previous titles to Sandstorm, and seeing it go and continue in this direction is a little heartbreaking as a fan of the series and of the studio for such a long time. But I think it's important that we go over that brief history, just because it's important to understand why I think there's a lot of, I guess, discontent or disappointment from true fans of the series or of the studios. Because when we look at the previous titles and we look at Sandstorm, there are remnants of that original gameplay design. A lot of the newer additions to Sandstorm, it doesn't make sense to us. It just feels like the game is losing its identity and is pushing in a weird direction. So I think it's really important that you look at it. So if we look at why these decisions were made, and we look at the company from a business perspective, I think we get a clear perspective. For one, Jeremy Blum, who was like the mind behind a lot of the design decisions, is no longer at NWI. Andrew Spirin, also a big influence on gameplay design, no longer there. Michael Tsuharis, or Mikey as a lot of you guys know him as, who is the face of the game, he's no longer there. And then they sold the studio to Embracer Group. So it's really heartbreaking, and this is why true fans of the series are upset at where the game is going right now, because you can see that the company and the game is a shell of what it used to be, right? Now let's talk and change the notes to some of the good things that Insurgency Sandstorm did, and let's hop onto a more positive track, right? When they moved on to Insurgency Sandstorm, I think we got a couple of amazing advancements and a couple of slight setbacks when the game first released, right? Originally, when I was in love with this game and I would play it constantly, the gameplay was the same Insurgency that we were all looking for: fast, fluid, hardcore, tactical, and it was just an amazing time in those early days of Insurgency Sandstorm. But that was mainly only for people who could run the game, you know, efficiently, people who were getting 60+ frames. And optimization in early Sandstorm was killer. I know a lot of you guys had struggled through those times, and some of you even to today struggle with Sandstorm's optimization. But they brought over a ton of amazing improvements as well from Day of Infamy and lessons learned from the original Insurgency, right? They opened up the maps a little bit more to give you a grander sense of scale, which I think was great for the time, because this is when we were starting to see platoon shooters like Squad, Hell Let Loose, Postscriptum kind of open up maps a little bit more. And then we also started to see the commander call-ins, which was a staple for tactical shooters at this point. So bringing that system over from Day of Infamy was an absolute welcome addition. I think one of the things that a lot of people were looking forward to in Sandstorm as well was the immersive single-player experience. And this goes back to believability, realism, and keeping things thematic, right? Because having that kind of narrative drawn into the game, I think does a really good job in keeping the entire realm or universe of Sandstorm believable. But when we move further down in development and we start to see some people in the studio drop off, we start to see these bigger design changes occur, it worries us, right? When the single player got axed, we started seeing more arcadey game modes like gun game or zombie game modes, or just even the hardcore checkpoint is a little scuffed in my opinion. We also started to see things like the skins getting a little bit crazier and crazier every iteration, right? Like if you look at Day of Infamy skins and their DLC content, and then you look at Sandstorm's DLC content, you can clearly see something changed, right? Because Day of Infamy, they had the units, it was immersive, it was thematic, it was believable. We start to get into Sandstorm, we see red and blue digital camo, we see these weird masks and head shrouds that are going on. They tried to push out the freaking Chinese New Year's limited edition skin thing, which was an absolute disaster. And it was just, it's insane to me how much Sandstorm has kind of moved in the opposite direction. So when a lot of original fans of the series are upset, this is kind of why. But does Sandstorm have its original gameplay? Can I still recommend this game as a good beginner tactical shooter? Because there was a long time when I used to recommend this game as the go-to beginner or intro game for people trying to get into milsim or tactical shooters, because it was close enough to games like CSGO, it was fast, it was fluid, the controls were simple, and it was a really hardcore experience that required teamwork. And as the game continues to be developed, I noticed, and I went back and played it a little bit, that some of those remnants of the original gameplay design are still there. I'm still being able to get some of that experience in my current games today. So it is still possible to use this game as a decent first step into the tactical shooter genre. But I'm not sure how much longer we'll be able to say that, because as NWI continues to add or make these changes, we're getting further and further away from, I think, the original vision of this series. But if you are looking for that experience, or if you really are still looking for a casual game to get into more of the hardcore tactical shooters like Squad or Arma or stuff like that, I still think there's a lot of lessons that you can learn from Sandstorm, right? You can still learn how to work the time to kill, how those reloads work. It's not like Rainbow Six Siege or any Call of Duty where you reload and your entire mag is refilled. There's still some magazine retention in Insurgency. You have to learn how to use smokes and communicate effectively to take points, how to interact with commanders, and how different roles have different jobs. Like the saw isn't just like in Call of Duty where you're running around drop shotting people with the saw. You're there to suppress. The snipers are there to mainly take out priority targets. You have a lot of things that you can learn in Sandstorm still. So I'm relieved that that still exists in Sandstorm, because honestly, I know the co-op side of things has been struggling for a long time. More and more changes are being made to co-op that just makes it more and more arcadey. And that was one of the things that made Sandstorm and NWI in general unique, is that their co-op experience was pretty solid, pretty dead on. I know a lot of players that only played Sandstorm or Day of Infamy co-op versus AI, right? Like the raid or the defense objectives or even checkpoint nowadays, there's whole communities built around that tactical experience because there's a certain kind of gameplay that you get out of co-op versus AI as far as the tactical side of things that you just can't get from PvP. So for all my guys who are looking for a co-op versus AI hardcore experience, it's getting more and more difficult for me to recommend this to you guys. So is Insurgency Sandstorm still worth playing as a tactical shooter, which is where I think I and a lot of the original fans are coming from? I'd have to say in its current state, I think there are still things that as a new player to the genre, you can learn and get in. But if you are looking for a more in-depth experience, I would almost go and skip Sandstorm these days and jump straight into Squad. There's just too much here that's getting bloated or too far away from the original design, too much arcadey stuff that I personally don't enjoy. And while that might be what a lot of other people are looking to play, like a faster paced Call of Duty style game, I think personally for me and just my way of playing games and how I like to play games as far as a tactical shooter perspective, it's getting harder and harder for me to reboot Sandstorm, get in there, even with the ISMC mod, which helps as far as adding in that more believable aspect to the game again with attachments and stuff like that. I think gameplay wise, I've done what I can trying to modify Game I, especially with the Communicate or Die mod, especially that we tried to just bring back that tactical sense of the game or that more believable sense of the game. We don't know how much longer it's going to sit here, and the trend is that it's going further and further away from us. So I guess my word of advice for all of you guys looking to purchase this game is if you're okay with this game continuing in an arcadey direction, then hey, I think Sandstorm is worth the purchase. If you're looking to use this game as a stepping stone for more tactical or hardcore shooters because, I don't know, maybe you're shy or you want to, slow roll into the genre, I'd say maybe jump straight into Squad at this point or Hell Let Loose, because as it stands right now, I don't think this game is going to stay with this original design for very much longer. I think as the updates continue to roll out, we're going to start seeing more and more outlandish or arcadey features added to the game that a lot of fans of the series, original fans of the series, will not necessarily appreciate. But I hope you guys did enjoy today's commentary video. I know we were a little bit brutal, but this is just me keeping it 100% real with you guys. If you want to buy these other games like Squad or Hell Let Loose or even Arma, if you're going to dive off into the deep end, remember you can head over to karmakut.com, support the channel with a purchase there on any gamer merch. But that's all I've got for you guys today. I hope you did enjoy today's video. As always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. And until next time, guys, good hunting out there.